Well, here we are on what is it, Friday morning? What a beautiful Friday morning it is too. It's cold out there, but it's beautiful, isn't it? Right, Pat?
Judy,
Same across.
in Donegal, I'm looking out. I can see there's a lake over there, Loch Swilly, and there's a sort of high ground. But about a week ago there was snow and ice and bitterly cold.
Mm.
Jude, there's a wee touch of spring coming in some
There-
way. I don't know. It's not exactly roasting warm, but it's a nice morning.
it's pretty chilly here too. But oh God, it's that light of spring that gives you heart to
Exactly.
go
I think
on.
it's the light more than anything else.
Uh,
Yeah.
isn't it all? My mother used to say, "You shouldn't be wishing your life away," and
Yeah.
that's
Well,
what, that's what I'm doing. Wishing, oh,
maybe
let the
she
days
said
get
that as
longer,
well.
and then let the days get warmer, and then
Yeah.
you know. Anyway, okay, to business. Pat, you've noticed this story, and I think I saw it too or heard about it, but I didn't know it in the detail that you mentioned.
Yeah.
These Israelis entering this refugee camp and killing
Yeah.
Palestinians. What was the
Yeah, Jude,
pretext for that?
on Wednesday, the IDF and the Israeli Defense Forces raided the Jenin refugee camp, and they killed 10 Palestinians. Now, Jude, there's last year there's just it's disputed figures, but they certainly the Israelis killed more than 150 Palestinians. Now, Jude, I don't understand. I have a thing about this whole thing because I was so involved for years in areas about Bloody Sunday. But there's almost a Bloody Sunday happening twice a year or three times a year and to the Palestinians. The Americans say nothing. The Brits say nothing. The EU say nothing. And I'm going, wait a minute. The Palestinians are getting it beat up them non-stop and and yet the victim, the Israelis play the victim that they are the victims of terrorism, that the Palestinians are terrorists. The
Oh,
Israelis are killing them, and then it's like the school bully who slaps a wee fella across the face for about 10 times, and then when the wee fella responds, they go, "Oh look, he's violent," you
yeah,
know.
yeah.
And I'd love to know the mental gymnastics, the morality that we all sit back and sort of say that the Israelis are the victims here and the Palestinians are the aggressors, because the evidence is so overwhelmingly the
Well,
other
this
way.
this
You
latest
know,
killing, Pat, was there any pretext for it, or was there any
Yeah, they claim as usual. The
justification?
Israelis claim as usual, Jude, every time they do this, that was to prevent an attack and so on.
A
I think it's
preemptive
basically
strike.
a preemptive strike. The usual. He was shot while trying to escape. What they've done, they do it every time. They went in apparently in a van, a white van, Israeli paratroopers. Now, Jude, I don't know the 100% of the background to it, but the Israelis do these things. They've gone into hospitals and so on and so. And of course, as usual, Jude, when it was all over, the Israelis suffered no casualties, but there was 10 dead Palestinians.
Yeah,
And Jude, it just happens all the time, every
yeah,
time, and you
yeah.
go, well,
Well,
I'm
here's my suggestion for the reason, Pat. One is that Israel is able, and with justification, to say, look at us, our tiny country set in the middle of a sea of Arabs and
yeah,
hostile people, which is true. And,
yeah,
yeah, I'm not saying that's a justification, but it is, when you put it in those terms, it does look like a small guy, David facing up to, surrounded by Goliath. But more important than that, I think it is the fact that you have Jewish influence at all sorts of important levels, especially the United States.
yeah,
Now, you may say, and you'll be right, that not every Jewish person supports the actions of the Israeli state. But if I was a Jew, I would have a big soft spot for them. I would be
yeah,
prepared probably to overlook all sorts of things on the grounds that my people, all their lives and going back centuries, were persecuted, and
yeah,
that the Holocaust was just the latest of those. So it's that I think it's the influence, the power that Jewish people, wealthy Jewish people, particularly exert in all spheres of life in America. They're very, very
yeah.
strong in terms of politically. So they're able to, if you like, make sure that anybody who's going to form a government in the United States is going to be on the Israeli side and keep feeding those weapons into them.
Yeah,
I think.
what you've just said, well, I'll give you an unequivocal guarantee, be described as anti-Semitic, because anything that suggests that Israelis have undue influence is considered anti-Semitic. because the difference between Israelis and Jews. Now, I am totally in agreement with that.
Pat, I have to say, look, whether or not anybody says it's anti-Semitic, surely to goodness, if you were in the shoes of a Jewish person living in New York or Boston or wherever, would you not have naturally some sympathy towards the state of Israel?
Absolutely. Here, I have no problem with the state of Israel existing. I am totally in favor of Jews being allowed to live in Israel in peace, etc., etc. That's never the argument. It's not the argument. That's this, as the Israelis play this game, a propaganda game, that they're the victim here and all the rest of it. Jews, the Israel or the Palestinians, sorry, are the ones who are getting the raw deal. It's Netanyahu, who's back again. I think is it the sixth time prime minister?
Yeah.
What's the most right wing government in history? There's a couple of fascists actually in his government, and these are people who are saying the Arabs have no right to exist in Israel, and so on, so on, so on. Like, these are people, they are subjugating, oppressing the Palestinians. And the Americans are just turning a blind eye. Now, by the way, there's a lot of very decent Jewish people, and that has to be put on record, who have come out against what's happening.
Yes, that's true.
It's not a Jewish thing. It's a humanitarian thing.
Yeah, but I would say it is that tends to be the exception rather than the rule. That most Jewish people do seem to sit quietly, or outside Israel, most Jewish people seem to be either quiet or to be actually actively in favor of and supporting Israel. Yeah. And again, you can see all sorts of historical reasons for it, but it doesn't change the brutality with which they're treating the Palestinians.
Okay, no, I think it's what disappoints you. You'd think if there's one group of people who
what you're going to say
of what's happening, one race of people or one nation that would have understanding, instead of that, you sit back and you sort of go, here we go again. Do you know there was at least 150 Palestinians shot dead last, at least 150.
But there is a tendency, when people are being oppressed, especially for a long time, there is a tendency when they finally get their foot on the ladder or up a few steps, they tend to be quite possessive and to kick the teeth of anybody coming behind them. So,
this is never going to happen again.
Yes, exactly. So there's really say, well, terrible things were done to us. We don't give a damn. Nobody's going to mess with us in any way. Palestinians, Hezbollah, fine, you're dead.
Yeah, but when you're the victim of victims and nobody buys your suffering, I think that's immoral.
It's terrible. But do you think it'll ever change? I don't hear Joe Biden or anybody else in the United States raising the question of supporting Israel as an electoral issue.
Yeah, well, the AIPAC, the big American-Israeli lobby group, it has serious influence. Anybody who speaks out against Israel, there's a major campaign launched against them, and it's always well-funded.
It's very sad. I would have thought that there must by now be enough people who see the brutality that's been inflicted on the Palestinians and who would stand up and say something. But no American politician I can think of, not a single one I can think of, on either party.
Jeremy Corbyn has been smeared for years. Without question, the most principled politician in British recent history. As an anti-Semite, a man whose parents took to the street to protest against Oswald Mosley, who spent his life fighting against discrimination, including discrimination against Irish people.
Well, why didn't
because of anti-Semitism?
Why didn't the Jewish people who knew Jeremy Corbyn and who might have campaigned alongside him, why didn't they speak up? Is it as it is? Is it like with the DUP that, for example, in my opinion, people like Barry Michael Duff were never sectarian, and yet his fellow townsmen or countrymen, they knew the truth of it through working with them day after day or week after week, but they dare not speak out, as it would be seen as an act of disloyalty against their own party. Is that the same thing with the Israelis?
Well, I think what happened, Jude, there was two things. With a lot, now in fairness, a significant, but not a majority, a significant number of Jewish people in the Labour Party actually come out in support of.
Did they? Not strongly enough then.
They weren't the right Jews, apparently. But then the other thing is, the whole thing, a lot of Jews were against Corbyn, not because he was anti-Semitic, but because he was pro-Palestinian.
Yeah.
That's simple as that.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, terrible. Okay, let's move from one tragedy to another that's still as fresh in most people's well, a lot of people's minds as the day it happened, and that's the slaughter of the people in Derry on Bloody Sunday. Has the horror of that dissipated to an extent, Pat, or is it still?
Oh,
Do you have young people as indignant still as the older people?
not at all, Jude. It's something I would love somebody to do, these professional guys. Jude, it's a trauma that's come down the generations. You see, I think the thing, Jude, was, what was it, 6 or 7 of the people that died were only teenagers, and they had brothers and sisters. Like, Jude, it's 50 years ago, but every Christmas, every birthday, the brothers and sisters of those people who died, particularly the young people. I'm not dismissing the older people, but most of these are still alive 50 years later, 51 this year, and every family wedding, every occasion that there's a family get together, there's a chair, missing type thing, and they're aware of it. And I think until all these people die, all the brothers and sisters and all the rest of it, I have talked to young people and people who are in their 20s and 30s. And when you chat in 10 minutes of that conversation, you think, geez, these people lived through Bloody Sunday, and they haven't. There's no way they can have lived through Bloody Sunday. Yet it's as real to them because they've listened to so many stories from their fathers and their mothers and their brothers and their sisters. Well, not their brothers and their sisters, but it's a communal trauma that has not gone away. And it's very, very powerful, Jude. It's as
interesting
as it was 50 years ago.
Yeah. Somebody was talking to me, actually, an Irish guy living in the States, and he was making the case that the on Gorta Moor, the Great Hunger, happened to people, in the 19th century. But there is actually psychological evidence that trauma can be passed through generations. So people who actually weren't even alive or born at the time of the terrible things that happened, that they're in some ways suffering still from that. I wonder, is that possible?
That I cannot answer, Jude. But I remember my mother. Now she would have it's more than 100 years ago since she was when she had been born. She was born about 1916, and I remember this thing. She had this terrible thing about hunger and about all the rest of it, And I think she'd say, "Eat up," and so on, because I think her maybe our grandparents, or well, certainly our parents would have had clear memories of the on Garda Moor. It was an unbelievable thing. That came down the generations as well.
Interesting. Well, certainly, you wouldn't actually have to have a psychological state of trauma to be hugely indignant and remember what happened. Now, so whether it's trauma or not, I don't know. When you say that thing about eating up and clearing your plate, sure, we all lived with that. In fact, my nieces complained that their mother, my sister, when they were small, used to say, drive them nuts by saying, "Don't be wasting that good food."
Yeah. It's almost the opposite now. You're told, don't finish your food.
Well, they actually, I don't want to get off the topic here, but the amount of waste of food in the West is something unbelievable. Unbelievable. It's a wonder there isn't more of a drive when they're, making this drive to make sure.
A quick story. I used to, when I was working in the journal, and at lunchtime, I used to go into this place to get a sandwich, a wee place next door. And one day I left it late. Normally the lunch hours between 1 and 2. Anyway, I forgot all about it because I worked over lunch. Anyway, and I noticed 2:30, and I was just going on. And I went into the wee place next door, and I said to the girl, "Lucy, can you have sandwiches?" Not, but she's lucky. We're going to throw them out. And I says, "What are you going to throw out?" She's, "Them pies over there." She says, "We can't do anything with them." Dude, they gave me 2 pies for free, and I don't know how many they threw out. They were warm pies. And she says, "Look, she says, but I'm not going to charge you for them because they were going in the bin." Dude, I thought that was atrocious.
It's very hard to see a way out of that, though. If you're in the catering trade, you'd have to make sure you've got enough stock. Somebody comes in and asks, "I want a bun," or whatever. You've got to have a bun. So you need to be very finely tuned to the needs of the community to get it right every time. And I can see how they'd be very fearful that in any way their produce would not be fresh, and maybe even make people ill if it wasn't sufficiently fresh. But it's a horrible thing, and I must say I feel that myself, and I look at the stuff we throw out. Even it's just not right. that thing of clean your plate, someone sticks with it. Okay, more happier things, not more happier, but happier things in Ireland are happening, as well as the memory of these ghastly things. And that is, it looks like they said some years ago the British are coming in terms of the
Yeah,
Oscars. It looks like the Irish have arrived.
exactly. Gale Force.
Very good, Pat. I like it. I like it.
Yeah,
So the
fully
Banshees of
confident.
Inisherin, an Irish goodbye. I don't know what that is. Oh,
Aye.
oh yes, I know that one. That's from the Northern
That's
lot.
the northern one.
Aye. And then there's on Colleen Coon.
Aye.
And
There's one called After Sun as well.
oh, that's right.
Uh,
That's an Irish actor, is the main actor there.
Aye, Paul Mescal.
Where's he
Yeah.
from? Where's he from?
He's from, I think he's Meath, isn't it? Somewhere
Is he?
around.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
He's the guy that starred in Normal People, which
That's right. I just discovered that yesterday. But I mean, they're talking about him as being like a Brando. That there's a kind of a brooding attraction.
He seems to have this ability to really get into a role,
Aye.
and I don't know that, and he's not stunningly good looking. He's
I was
not
going to
stunningly
say
bad.
that exactly what I was going to say. With Brando, he was such an amazingly handsome guy that, once he came in and that brooding presence he had,
Yeah,
I didn't get
yeah,
anything of that. Like, I thought he was well cast in Normal People. He was a very normal looking guy. He wasn't ugly or anything, but he just looked like an
no,
ordinary guy. But apparently now
yeah.
he's got the glow of being a kind of a superstar and hugely attractive for that reason.
Well, everything he's turned his hand to, Normal
Aye.
People, really took off in a way, and I struck a chord,
Aye.
seemingly, with the Brits. Now,
You know,
I remember, me and you had a discussion. I read Normal People long before it became a TV series,
popular
and I
or
remember
profitable.
before it was either what is it, profitable or whatever. Anyway, I read it way back.
Profitable
I
or
remember telling
popular.
you, or popular, exactly. Sorry, I couldn't remember that phrase, but anyway, I remember me and you talking about it. But the funniest thing about that book was I read it and I was going, Jesus, the Ireland I grew up on is gone. Here it was, but a young fella goes in and he and his girlfriend start having sex almost right away. The mother and father sort of knew about it. There was no big deal. In the book, the young fella, his father, his mother was a single parent. There was no mention of a father, and it was never mentioned. And the whole, the old Catholic Ireland was dead and gone. It was like it could have been downtown Berkeley or wherever the hell it was, or California. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah, but you can't fault the book for doing that. If it's representing Ireland as it is today, you might want
yeah.
it that way. Well, I wouldn't want it that way. But the fact of the matter is, it probably is true.
No,
Normal.
but no, no. The point was this young fellow was going to what I would call the equivalent of the school that you or I went to. You went to
Yeah.
St. Collins, I went to St. Junans. And I remember the priests and the strict rules. There was one fellow got a beating one time from one of the priests for saying, "I like girls." He wrote it up on the board or something like that, and whatever. And here's this young fellow with his school blazer playing GA, having sex regularly with the daughter of I think his mother's a cleaner in a house, and he meets the daughter of the house, and and everybody knows it, and everybody's having their relationships, and there is absolutely, and it's, by the way, just pro forma. There's no problem, no issues. The parents know, and all the rest of it, and so on, so on. Last thing, see if when I was 17, I had started having sex with some young girl in Letterkenny, and my parents, there would have been outrage, there would have been scandal, there would have been, and I was thinking, Jesus, 50 years on, the world has definitely changed as
Are
in
you glad
regards to
it's
Ireland.
changed, Pat? That's the key. Or are you not?
What?
Are you
What?
glad it has changed? Or would you rather it
Yeah,
was more like,
yeah, Jude, I'm in a way. No, I'm not saying everything that's rosy in the garden, and I don't necessarily, but the hypocrisy, the nastiness, and there was so much covered up. And Jude, I think I was like, I still regard a lot of what happened to us when we were growing up as like the Taliban. This, the priests telling us what we could think, and running dance halls and all the rest of it.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
You sort of go, Jesus Christ, and by the way, I'm not saying in Ireland, well, maybe it's an exaggeration as well, but we tend to swing from one end of the pendulum to the other almost overnight. We never do anything gradually.
Aye. And all that's coming from our we've managed to pit a bleak picture out of something as marvelous. All these actors
Yeah.
going to I wonder if there's a danger. We'll move on, but there's a danger, I think, that so often Irish people get very worked up about an athlete or a tennis player or a rugby team or an international team, soccer, whatever, and then they kind of let you down. They're very gallant losers. Remember the time Jack Charlton's team, they said, oh, they won another draw.
Aye. But here's what's going to happen, Jude. I wouldn't bet on it. Probably they will not win any major awards. I'll be really surprised. Like you can watch it already. It's like it's an American institution. I know, okay, every so often they sort of that, but it's a sort of the exception that proves the rule. I was watching a wee bit last night for the promo for the Fablemans. You know, it's Martin, what do you call him? Not Scorsese. Scorsese. The Jewish guy. What do you call him? He did.
I know who you're talking about. The guy who did E.T.
The guy did E.T. Jesus.
Yeah. Come to me.
It's based on his life, and they said it's a genius film and all the rest, and it's harking back to the 1950s, and I'm giving it that films like that will definitely. I can't see how the
Steven Spielberg.
Spielberg, Spielberg. That's exactly. So that's Jude. I don't. Well, could be wrong, Jude, but I always think you can almost see the mother of the white picket fence in 1950s America, and then and the lives of the blonde behind closed doors. They always played big to the American gallery.
Maybe it's a bit like my wife. She refuses to be optimistic about things because she might get a disappointment. So she can block it by being pessimistic, and then it might work out.
When Ireland's playing, I just say, I'm not going to get excited here. By the way, did you say Steven Spielberg in it?
I think I said Steven.
No, it just came into my head. No, but okay. I'm the same as Martin. I have a thing. I know I'm going to be disappointed, so don't get your hopes up.
Well, I'll watch it, and I think I'll go out on a limb and I'll say Ireland will do us proud, at least. Okay, there's so many of them. Bloody hell, somebody's got to win a few things. There's so many of them in. And Enoch Burke. Does that name come back to you, mixing memory and desire?
Oh, yes.
What am I?
Jude, you know something? For a long time, I had a lot of sympathy for him. And to a certain extent, I still do. Jude, I don't think anyone should be told that you have to call somebody, by a name that you don't. Like, by the way, Jude, let me get this on record. And I want to make this very clear. If somebody is gay, transgender, I don't give a monkey's. You're quite entitled. And I live, my philosophy in life is, if you don't harm anybody, I don't care. Live and let live. But Enoch Burke said, his religious beliefs, he was told to call somebody they rather than he or she. And he says that's against his beliefs. Now, I think he's entitled to those beliefs. And I have an objection to that because, Jude, I was reading the Manchester Evening News recently where it says they had killed their mother, and they was actually a fella. It's a transgender fella. And by the way, Jude, it totally confused me because I thought there was two people. And I am objective as a newspaper man. If you believe in clarity and sort of succinctness and anything else, I was brought up with they was plural, he or she were singular. I think he's just starting to confuse language, but that's a side issue. Enoch Burke, I've sort of lost somebody for him. Jude, he has been sacked, I don't think, not because of his beliefs, but his behaviour. His behaviour has now just gone out of control. Like a judge said yesterday, look, this is pointless. You've been fired by the school. They can't deal with you. You're not going to be any, and so on. Basically, the judge says, look, from here, I think it's 2:00 today, he's going to get fined 700 euros a day for contempt of court.
You have to admire him, and he comes from in some ways, and he comes from a very, very clever family. If you look at the detail of him and his brothers, and maybe the sister too, I think I'd want to distinguish very clearly between his attitude to the guy being a trans and his attitude towards the they, the pronoun they or them rather than him or you or whatever, singular. I would tend to agree with you with regard to the trans thing. I mean, if people want to trans away, although I have to admit at the back of my mind is this: if it was a member of my family, I'm sorry, there'd be people who will say I'm being discriminating and nasty. But if one of my sons or one of my daughters came to me and said, I'm going to transition from the sex I am or the gender I am to another one, I would be very, very worried, very, very upset, actually. What about you?
Wouldn't we all? Yeah.
You?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Maybe that's a test, maybe we could say it's okay. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, it's okay for people to go ahead with it. But I mean, I'd really be worried if any of my grandchildren grew up to decide that they wanted to change. It just seems in the face of nature.
Yeah, but, and this life is hard enough, Jude. Jesus, you can't say, and you worry about them no matter what. And it's not, if somebody wants to try and turn it on that you're biased or discriminatory, far from it. But Jude, I think, someone, Jude, I'd be very concerned if a 15-year-old, if somebody's so confused that they think they're female or they're male or whatever it is, I don't care what they think. Like there have been quite a few cases, as far as I'm aware, where people have transgendered and then have said this was the wrong thing.
Yeah.
But it's unfortunate. It's a wee bit late today. There are other people, let's get this clear, have transgendered and very, very happy. So I don't know.
But, I'm thinking about that guy who was the writer, Jan something. Brilliant writer, apparently lived a very happy life. I think there's two things that make it difficult for me. One is I just, as I say, feel that it's contrary to nature. You're really saying to nature, look, you made a mistake, change me. And people are making this decision when they're teenagers. Geez, that really worries me. That really worries me. Because I don't think teenagers should be allowed to decide anything. I don't think they should be allowed to decide to go to the shops, never mind to change their gender. But the other thing is reason, just simple logic to say it's like saying in 1984, 1 + 1 = 3. This is he is an individual or she is an individual. She is not a they or a them. He is not a they or them. I mean, that really strikes at the root of rationality.
That's what gets me. And
can people accept that?
I had a discussion, and I'll not name it, inside my own family circle. And they're sort of saying, Pat, no, that's what you're saying is old-fashioned and irrational. I'm going, no, it's not. Jude, I was brought up very simple, and it's not. The whole rationality is 1 + 1 = 2, not 3. And one person doesn't become they.
It's a very interesting thing. I will just go on now, but to hold, it seems to me today, to hold opinions, even quietly to hold those opinions yourself, is to leave yourself open to the charge of being anti-people.
Yeah.
No. So if I quietly think it's not a good idea for people to trans, if I said that, I mean, probably might be people come back to us with this. They would say, you're transphobic or you're a bigot or whatever. And likewise, if I say, no, I think it doesn't make sense. I think it's against rationality to say 1 + 1 = 3. They say you're opposed to. Why are you're curbing this person's liberties? The Irish Times is fun. Here's a quotation in the Irish Times this morning, right, about this kid in the school. The student out of the attitude that Enoch Burke took may drive the student out of the school or make them and their parents live with a regime that inflicts daily suffering and creates a serious danger of lasting psychological harm. I really think that's overstating the case massively. I really, really do. And it's essentially saying Burke shouldn't have that opinion. Now, trespass on the school is another matter, but I think it's wrong to say he can't.
But here's the thing, Jude. If you're transgender, that is your business, and I'll support you 100%. But if you're asking me, do I agree with it? No.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see if we can something a wee bit more cheerful. Given we only got a short way to go. I'm definitely trying to remember. Oh yes, Berkeley. This Bishop Berkeley, who was a philosopher. I think he's the guy. I remember a philosopher who was refuting somebody else's claim, another philosopher's claim. This philosopher was claiming that everything was an illusion, that we were living in a sort of a dream. We thought things were there, but they weren't. And I think Berkeley was the guy who came along and kicked this big rock, and really, he says, my toe hurts, so I think it's there.
Yeah, I don't
But
remember too much, but Jude, wasn't he was, as far as I remember, he was from Kilkenny, and
yeah,
he went to Trinity College in Dublin, and
yeah.
the Berkeley University in America named after him.
Oh, we might be. I never thought of that actually. But there's a library named after him
In
in Trinity.
98% certain it's named after him.
Isn't
But
that interesting?
the problem was I think he became somewhere about 1700, give or take 10 years. He went to Trinity, and I think he became a fellow of Trinity, and then but anyway, he became a bishop, and he became now, Jude, probably know more about, but he became one of the great philosophers of his
Yeah, yeah.
age.
He's one of these
But
names, all right. Yeah.
the problem, but here's the issue now. Apparently, he owned slaves
Yeah.
and so on.
Aye.
So the great philosopher and so on owned slaves. And here's the problem, isn't it? TCD, the main library,
Yeah.
and TCD, isn't it the Berkeley Library?
So
And
yeah.
there are those who nowadays want to sort of change it. They don't want to be associated with a slave owner. And I think there are moves afoot to get it changed.
So what do you think? Should they?
No, dude, straight up, I don't agree with it. Like, I'll boil this down to you as simple. You know that Dublin and the Rare Old Times, Pete St. John, he was on radio one day and he says, that line, he says, the RT or somebody wanted them to change, with skin as black as coal.
Oh,
and
yes.
When she moved to Birmingham, she took away my soul. And he says, how insane is that? He said, it was of its time, it was of its place, and all the rest. Dude, if these people this, and I'm calling them the woke brigade, and I'm part of the woke brigade myself half the time. But if these people are this, dude, you better get a marker out and go through Huckleberry Finn, Shakespeare, anybody that you can think on, because they were of their time.
Well, the Irish Times, Pat, has argues against that. It says, for example, to say there's an article that maybe Fintan O'Toole or somebody like that, and he says, it's all very well talking about they were off their time and that's the way people thought then. But he says, well, there was people who didn't think that way then, starting with the people who were enslaved, that they did everything to try to, they clearly were against slavery. In addition, he claims there was other Irishmen and sort of upstanding citizens who objected to it, so that Berkeley, by being part of the slavery brigade, so to speak, made a choice. It wasn't simply that the whole pressure of the time made it impossible for him to think any other way.
Yeah, but that's simplistic with the greatest respect. There was all the landed gentry and all that. They believed in public execution at the time. Not everybody agreed with public, but that was the norm. They agreed with prison sentences that were draconian. They agreed with transportation. There was women behaved in a certain way. Jude, that's revisionism gone mad.
I tend to agree with you, Pat, because I'm a great believer in the notion that most people take their views and even their values from what most other people are doing or what stance they take, and we do that sort of subconsciously. We don't make a conscious decision. But
how long have we left?
Go ahead.
How long have we left?
We have a minute.
How long have we left?
1.5 minutes.
Right. Quick question. Do you think Waddy Glen of Mahara should challenge their defeat on last Sunday when Crokes had 16 players on the pitch for the last 2 months?
I thought they had already, Pat. I thought that the thing now is they're waiting for those.
Do you agree with it?
Absolutely. If you've got 16 men on the field at a time when it was possible for the opposing team to win, then that's against the rules. Totally.
Yeah.
And for them to, they really should be hanging their heads in shame that they tried it on. Yeah. I think it's ridiculous. Now, I must say, I'm kind of guarding against this thing of saying, oh, this is a northern team, and therefore I'm right behind them. In a way, I am, but I always get a bit nervous about that because you very quickly get to a partitionist mentality. But incidentally, do you know what is it again? Waddy Graham. Do you know who Waddy Graham was? Do you know who Waddy Graham was?
Was he executed?
I looked it up there, so you know more about him than me, obviously. He was one of the United Irishmen. He was an elder in his church, Presbyterian church. His father was an elder in the church. And he led a part of the uprising in Mahara area and was executed. And that's why he's called that. It's funny more people don't use that. Anyway, Pat, we're out of time. Okay. I want you
Okay,
guys to
Jude.
enjoy the sunlight.
Catch you Monday.
Okay.
Thank you, Jude.
Okay.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Bye, Jude.
Bye.